Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you guys for coming to our session, Open Access Monographs, Promise or Bust. We have 4 speakers joining us today. I'll introduce them briefly in the order that they will be speaking and then hand right over so we have maximum time for them and for your questions. Our first speaker is Frank Smith. He's the director of books at JSTOR. Our second speaker will be Eric Van Ryn. He's the interim director for the University of California Press. Our third speaker is going to be Rebecca Welzenbach. She's the director of strategic integration and partnerships for Michigan Publishing. And finally, to bat cleanup will be Dean Smith, who's the director of Cornell University Press. And I forgot to say, I'm Heather Staines. I'm the director of partnerships for Hypothesis, and I thank you for joining us here today. Frank?
All right, good morning. There were 2 catalysts for this session. Catalyst number 1 was just over a year ago, JSTOR loaded open access books to its site and made them fully open. We started with 4 presses, 3 of whom are represented here today, and the 4th was UCL Press, and 60 books. And in the spring, the director of UCL Press, Laura Speicher, said to me that they would like to have an analysis, a very full and rich analysis of the usage data of the books that they had on JSTOR. And after discussion, we agreed it'd be much better if we could include more books than just their books. So we agreed that we would include the books of Cornell University Press, the University of Michigan Press, and the University of California Press. All of whom graciously agreed to participate, and ultimately they hired, because this was managed by UCL, Knowledge Unlatched Research, which is to say Francis Pinter, Lucy Montgomery, and colleagues to do the analysis. So JSTOR provided the data, they did the work, the result was published this week and is online, and there's a picture of it. The paper, there's the address of where to go and get it for yourselves to read at home in your leisure. So I'm not going to talk about that paper, but I'm going to instead focus on the larger JSTOR experience so far with OA books, because it actually encompasses more than the books just of the publishers who are here today. And then I'm going to end with a few observations from our experience after a year. So our motivation, we had 2 objectives going into this. The first was to make open access books available on JSTOR for the benefit of readers who we hoped would use them. And the second objective was to learn as much as we could about open access books, because in many ways it was all very mysterious. It wasn't clear to us, at least, what was the promise and what was likely to be the use, and some of the questions about what would happen in the future. So I'm happy to say today that we can declare complete victory on both counts. We have had the books on JSTOR, they have been used, and we have learned a whole lot of things that we had no idea about, and I'm not sure other people would have known about. So there's a graph showing the growth of the number of open access books on JSTOR to date. We're up to just over 2,400 titles now from 24 presses. I contrast that at the bottom with the OAPN platform, not to draw invidious distinctions, far from it. They're doing terrific work, but just to say they have something like over 3,800 titles. So we're nearing some comparability. There's about a 40% overlap books that we have and they also have at the moment. But that was really the first mover, primary platform for open access books. Here's a list of the presses from whom we have books. One essential thing, JSTOR is a curated platform. So we are not accepting open access books from just anybody. To date, the books have come either from existing publishing partners for whom we have been selling books, or presses like UCL Press, whose books meet the same standards of peer review and high scholarly quality, and also which fit with the general research profile for JSTOR. We are primarily a humanities and social sciences research site. We do have books and journals in the sciences, but not for the most part. So the books are available completely open. You do not have to be affiliated with any institution. You can find them. We do offer digital preservation of the books in Portico. And if you're a library, you can either set them up in your Discovery service, or there are free MARC records available from OCLC. So we've tried to use the conventional mechanisms for discovery and integration. It just seemed like the logical thing to do to encourage maximum use of the books. They're fully integrated into JSTOR, into searches. We do tell you that they're open access in case that's of interest to you. I'm going to guess for 99% of readers it's not. They probably don't know what it means and probably don't care. But we neither segregate them, nor do we make a big deal about the fact of what they are. They simply are there. That was also one of our premises going into it. Just make them part of this search aggregation, this discovery platform, and let's see what would happen. This is a pie chart showing the sources, how people are coming to the books on JSTOR. 42% of all the uses have been people coming direct to JSTOR. Somebody is just opening up JSTOR, or they've run a search somehow. They're not coming through any other intermediary. You'll note Google Scholar is only 1%. That's actually in line with other book discovery. Google Scholar is really not a books discovery service, so there's nothing really surprising about that. And they are being used. In the past year, we have now recorded more than 2,100,000 uses. We define a use as either the downloading of a chapter or the viewing online of that chapter. Either one counts. In the month of October, we had almost 500,000 uses of the OA books. So on average, 227 uses per title per month. That graph shows you the period throughout the year. So far, interestingly, the pattern of use matches the pattern of other materials that we see used on JSTOR. It also mirrors the academic calendar in the Northern Hemisphere. That's possibly a correlation, not to be a surprise, no real surprise there. But here's where it gets interesting and exciting to us. We've recorded uses in 226 countries and territories. There's a heat map showing where in the world, yes, the United States dominates, but so do many other places like India, China, Russia, and there's no abuse that we've been able to monitor so far. In case that last reference makes you think, they're just pulling the books into Sci-Hub. We don't see that. We think it's legitimate use. 54% of the use that we've recorded is not from people affiliated, who we see an affiliation for. They may be affiliated with an institution, but we don't recognize it. Potentially and almost certainly a great deal of use by people who are not in institutions and might not otherwise have ready access to academic books. We've recorded use at more than 9,500 institutions around the world. 70% of these are smaller institutions who, again, potentially don't necessarily have access to large collections. And it's also, it's not in any of this data that I'm showing you today, but what we also see is that the use is very evenly distributed. There's not a great deal of use at any one institution. There's a lot of use at many institutions. So even if we go to large ARLs, we're not seeing massive numbers in any one of them. What we're seeing is very large numbers at lots and lots of them. So as I said, there were things that we were hoping to learn. and questions that we hope that this would expose to help us think about the future. So the first thing that we learned is there does appear to be a lot of demand for the use of this content. That's perhaps not a surprise, perhaps that's naive even to say it, but until we did it, we didn't feel certain that that was something we ought to claim. We also learned in the course of the year there's no firm, good working definition of what constitutes an open access book. One of our large publishers, one of the publishers of a lot of books with us, has told us quite clearly, we are not an open access publisher, even though all of their books are available open. In their own minds, that's not part of what they think that they are doing. And I make no editorial comment either way. It's more of a sign of where is this in development in the system of scholarly communication? What are we all thinking about? We also learned that there are publishers who have books that are open to be read, but not to be downloaded. And those publishers maintain that their books are open. But we cannot include them. They actually sell access otherwise, both digitally and in print. So that's yet another definition of what constitutes open. We learned there's no, I'm going to show my age, there's no books in print for open access books. There is the directory of open access books affiliated with OAPN. It's entirely voluntary, who donates the data and how it's amassed, so it's incomplete. And again, that's not criticism, it's terrific that they're doing that, but there's no good way at the moment to assess what is the total universe of open access books available. It's undoubtedly larger than what we have and what you see on OAPN, but even getting our hands entirely around it remains something of a challenge. Anecdotally, we've learned that the awareness of open access books among faculty, students, many librarians and publishers is still quite low. I don't think that's shocking, but it's valuable to think about if we want to see open access extended and going in the future. And I'm over 10 minutes, so I'm going to go very fast here. Okay, we brought you in here with a tease of promise or bust. We've shown you there's promise. Where does the bust come in? The bust comes in the future. Will open access grow? At the moment, in the last year, out of the roughly 3,000 monographs published by the American University Presses, I calculate we had about 150 open access books. So it's still quite small. Will that grow? That is the big open question. And that's where the bust potentially comes in. I'm just going to leave you with one quick observation. 1,000 monographs to be open access would cost roughly $15 million. And so what does $15 million buy? Well, at the current average price of $48 per title, it would buy 1,000 individual monographs going into 312 libraries. 312 versus the same $15 million would make all those 1,000 books open access available to the rest of the world. So it's fanciful to an extreme to think that might happen, and yet the promise that we think we've demonstrated suggests that it's something that ought to be contemplated. And if it does happen, you'll find that there are partners willing in JSTOR, coming soon Project Muse, and in many publishers to work with you on open access books. So thank you very much.
While we're handing over to Eric, there are some empty seats in the front, and if I could ask you if you have bags on seats, to be so kind as to move them so that folks who do want to come up from the back can sit. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. I'm Eric Van Ryn. I'm from the University of California Press, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience with our Luminoso open access monograph publishing program and some of the things that we learned about discoverability and usage through this research project that Frank just gave you some information about that we conducted with KU Research using JSTOR data. So I'd like to just start out by kind of giving you an overview of what the Luminoso program is for those of you who aren't familiar with it. So Luminos effectively set out with two big goals. One was to create a more sustainable model for monograph publishing, which I think is still kind of a work in progress, and we understand that, and I think everybody does too. But the thing that I'm going to focus on the most today is that really the other thing that we are trying to do with Luminos is really facilitate global digital discovery, access, and usage. And through that, we were planning to make available sort of industry standard formats, both for reading and download, on our own platform initially at luminosoa.org, which is where all of our titles are hosted right now. But also we've expanded that out into a much larger ecosystem that has evolved with JSTOR, Muse, and other players getting involved in this. The other thing that's sort of a subset of this global digital access and usage component is facilitating the incorporation of enhancements where possible, where faculty and researchers wanted to enable those things in the digital editions of their books. So where EPUB enhancements like musical examples and streaming video and things like that could be incorporated into the EPUB files, we wanted to be able to facilitate that. So that was another kind of goal of the program. So just some quick background on the program as it exists right now. It launched in October of 2015, and it's now 2 years old. So it's old enough to have learned some lessons about how to do open access publishing, but young enough to be at an age when it can still pivot and do some things differently than it's been doing them in the past. We've published 40 titles in the program so far. And right now the title output is between 25 and 30 titles a year. We'd like to increase that pretty significantly, but there are obviously considerations for how that will work at our particular press that we have to address. All of these titles are available in EPUB, PDF, and MobiPocket formats for download, and then they're also available to be read as EPUBs on our own site. We make print copies available of all of the Luminos titles, also usually starting at around $34.95 for a print copy, which we do via print on demand. And originally these were all hosted just on our own site that we stood up to launch the program effectively. But in conversations with Frank and other folks at JSTOR, and also the folks at OAPN, we began to expand the network of providers that would be hosting this content. So we now, since September 2016, are submitting everything to JSTOR, and will eventually add Project Muse to that, and others who are interested too, and I'm happy to hear from other people. So in terms of, can open access really deliver globally, I think that's, one of the open questions. And if the jury was out, I think some of the reporting that we got back from this research project kind of indicated that we have been able to facilitate global access. If you look particularly at areas in the global south without large academic populations, all of the countries in red are the countries where you see the heaviest usage, and those are kind of scattered throughout the globe. So Frank alluded to this earlier, but I think we have facilitated global access to some degree with the program, which I think is pretty impressive. But another component of this study sort of took a look at how open access books fare versus paywalled content on the platform. And this slide actually represents the four presses that participated in this project: Michigan, UCL, California, and Cornell. Our results are in the bottom left quadrant here, and you can see that the paywalled content is actually not used as heavily as the open access content, which is blue. So the blue bars here represent usage of open access content. And just to talk a little bit about our own experience, because we host this content ourselves, I decided to drill into some of our own data and see how this compares to what's happening on our own platform. So you can see On the left is the views and the downloads from the JSTOR platform. On the right is what's happening on our own platform. And the usage is just far smaller on our own platform. And I'm going to get into some of the reasons for that in just a minute. But you can see that it's roughly 4 times in terms of views on the JSTOR side and roughly 6 times on the download side, with the preponderance of that usage really happening at JSTOR rather than on our own platform. And this is, of course, a little bit anecdotal, but I think there is sort of a rich discovery ecosystem that exists on the JSTOR platform that kind of facilitates this level of usage. If you embed this content in with thousands and thousands of other journal articles and book chapters, this is kind of what's likely to happen, right? Is people are going to find it and they're going to use it. And if you provide signals to people who are coming to the content that it's available freely via open access, they will tend to take advantage of that. So I just did a quick search for one of our authors in the Luminoso program, Roger Mosley. I turned up 3,100 search results or something like that, but a chapter of the book was in the top 5. And it gives me, links to get into other pieces of content on the platform that I think JSTOR is particularly good at facilitating, so topic linking and other things like that. Once you get into the content itself, this this kind of interlinking, continues basically. You can explore these topics further. You can save things to your lists. These are all of the reasons why people tend to use a platform a big aggregated platform that has a lot of content on it. And as Frank alluded to earlier, we discovered that a lot of people are coming to this content directly from JSTOR. About 35% in our case, are coming directly to the content because they discovered it directly on the JSTOR platform, which actually surprised me to some degree because I would have expected people to discover this content more on the open web than they actually seem to be doing. And I think that points to some work that we all have to do in terms of developing the competencies and the metadata capabilities to ensure that that happens in the future. But I also think that people do, in many cases, start their journey on the JSTOR platform because there's so much content there, particularly in the humanities. And if you look at our own site traffic, it does kind of mirror this to a certain extent. I mean, about 35% of our own site traffic to the Luminoso site is direct. It's just that, when we bring people into the Luminoso site, there isn't as much content for them to experience. So you're not seeing the kinds of usage that you would see on a big aggregated platform like a Muse or a JSTOR because there isn't really enough for them to experience there. So it's kind of hit and run traffic for us. They come, they find what they want, and they go, which sort of explains the lower usage. But you can see even search engines are a fairly low referral source for us, and this is just our Google Analytics data from the Luminoso site. So in terms of takeaways, I think the one takeaway from this research project is having your content on large aggregated platforms makes a difference. This is where people are going to find it and use it. I think particularly in an environment where we're still sort of struggling to figure out how to optimize OA book content for discovery in the discovery layer of a library system or in Google Scholar or in these other areas where we can direct traffic to the content from outside of these big platforms. And I think it does, sort of elucidate the fact that, they're not really, doing their jobs in terms of delivering readers to the content from outside. I think you also have to ask yourself the question, and Frank asked us to be provocative, so I will be provocative. Do you really want to get into the business of self-hosting this content? What are your motivations for doing that? And in our case, we want to be able to deliver the digital enhancements that you can deliver in an EPUB file, and that's not possible on the JSTOR platform because all they host is PDFs. So we have to have an environment where that's actually possible to do. So that's a motivation for us to continue to do it. But I do think that you have to think yourself about, whether or not you want to invest the resources that are necessary to put this on your own platform if it's really going to be discovered in aggregation. So I think just in thinking through, sort of a strategy for this, you want to be clear about what your motivations are, but if your motivation is to, enable global discovery and usage, you want to make sure that you have your content everywhere. I think that's one of the takeaway messages here, is that the current, book discovery ecosystem is very dispersed, and you want to make sure that you have your content on all the platforms where it can be found and read and accessed. Thank you.
Sorry, my backup timer. Hi, I'm Rebecca Welsenbach, and I'm from Michigan Publishing. I'm a librarian there. And I'm going to be focusing on the study that we did with JSTOR and how it's informing how we're thinking about usage reporting for open access monographs. So Michigan Publishing is a division of the U of M library. We do a lot of different activities, different kinds of publishing, but for today's purposes, I'll be focusing on the open access monographs published by the University of Michigan Press. So sort of our more traditional channel. Through the U of M Press, we've been doing open access monographs for a long time, more than 10 years, and we have more than 55 titles in our digital culture books imprint. But we've seen a lot of changes in the last 3 or 4 years in how people are thinking about this whole landscape. We've heard increased interest in OA and in measurable outcomes from our authors, from funding agencies, from other kinds of institutions. We've seen an increase in the kind of cross-institutional programmatic opportunities for participating in open access, programs like Open Library for the Humanities and Knowledge Unlatched. And along with those, we've seen, of course, a proliferation of platforms, more and more different ways to disseminate and discover and get at open access monographs. So how do we know if this is going in the right direction, if we're succeeding? Where's the promise and where's the bust? Eric showed us. We're hoping that we can glean this from the data that we gather. So we want data about usage, about reach, about impact and engagement. And so how do we get there? What questions ought we to be asking? We've been gathering usage data on our own books for quite a long time, but we haven't always been very satisfied with the tools available to us and the kinds of questions we can ask. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. For the books that we host on our own platform, we use Google Analytics, as many folks do. This is great. We can get a lot of information, but it's a lot. It's quite complex. It's not so easy to share with authors and others. And the biggest issue really is that it's only for things that we're hosting ourselves. We lose track of usage happening on other platforms, which, as we just heard from Eric, is actually where most of the usage is happening. From Knowledge Unlatched and from OAPN, we get regular counter reports. This is useful too. We get a sense of the sort of frequency, the popularity of different books. It's helpful that it conforms to a standard. The reports all look the same. That makes it easier to compare things. But these are pretty simple. I think there's a lot more texture, richness, robustness that we sense is sort of out there, more that we could know about how people get to the books, what they're doing with them, that is just sort of missing here. So we'd really like more. And a third sort of example of how we've thought about this, about a year ago, we were finishing up a study called Mapping the Free eBook Supply Chain. Part of it was to embed surveys in our open access books, and we invited readers to tell us about where they found the book, what they were going to do with it. This was really interesting, gave us a lot of qualitative data that we didn't have before, but it too is limiting in that it could only tell us about the answers from folks who opted in, who chose to give us answers, so it was limited in that way, and it's kind of a lot of effort to engage with and monitor this data. So all of this adds up to why we were so excited about this opportunity to embark on this research project with Frank, Eric, Dean, Laura, and KU Research. From the start, we'd seen much higher usage of our open access monographs on JSTOR, as California did. So we were interested in that. We wanted to know more about it. But we were also just as excited about the opportunity to collaborate with other presses, to compare notes, and to try to figure out what works and what doesn't, what we want to know and what we don't care about when we're measuring usage of open access monographs. So we had to start by asking the right questions, or some questions. I'm not going to read all these to you, but we'll go into some of them in greater detail as we go. We started with a bunch of questions to explore and sort of went from there. And from my point of view, actually, perhaps the most important outcome of this survey was figuring out which ones were useful and which weren't. I'm going to focus next on some of the ones that actually maybe didn't tell us anything very interesting, but that's valuable because now we can sort of move on from there and refine our approach to these things. So just to start with, we wanted to know what launched this whole program. Are the stats for the 4 initial publishers similar? And this is overall usage from August 2015 to August 2017 on JSTOR. And you can see the shape is generally the same. The raw numbers go up or down based on the number of titles. UCL is the one there that has nothing before when the open access books appear. But the shape is similar, and that's what we wanted to know. Likewise, this one shows, I know you can't read the text, but this shows the sources of data for the 4 different presses, just as Eric was talking about, direct traffic from JSTOR, traffic from Google, et cetera. And again, the shape of the story is very similar across all 4 presses. That's useful information for us. Now we have a sense of sort of some base consistency. On the other hand, maybe we don't need to like dig into this every month to see. We can just sort of expect that the presses are behaving the same way. Another example, this is a real rabbit hole we could have gone down. We asked what percentage of users are downloading files versus viewing them online. Okay, so a few more of them view than download. We can break that down a bit further. On the left there, that's about 21% of users who just download without viewing anything. The rest view something, and about a third of them in the middle also go on to download. The rest don't, they just go away. Okay, well that doesn't really tell us anything very interesting in and of itself. We might dig into it deeper. We could perhaps tie it to geographical data. Do people in different countries behave differently? We could tie it to time in the book. Are the people who are just viewing actually reading on the site, or are they not? But why should we do this? Why should we as publishers do this? What does it tell us? How does it change things? It might not. These are the kind of questions that maybe JSTOR would like to dig into in terms of evaluating user experience. But as publishers trying to craft a meaningful story about open access monographs, this is not so helpful. We're not going to do anything differently from it. So for me, this is one that we could now sort of leave aside. And third, we asked, are the most popular books on the OA platform different in subject matter from the subjects already popular in JSTOR? So again, the sample size for this study was smallish, but overall, not really, pretty similar. Social sciences, history, anthropology, cultural and social, general. So that's helpful to know. It means maybe we can compare open books and closed books on JSTOR. That's a really useful thing. But again, this is not a question that we need to sort of replicate every month or every quarter in a report. These things are just sort of, we can expect them to behave in predictable ways, and that's a really good thing. So I've emphasized a lot what we don't need to know, things we can leave aside. So what do we care about? As Eric said, we care about whether OA books are used more frequently than non-OA books. They are, a lot. That's important to us. That's a story we can tell to our authors, to our funders. We care where the readers are coming from in the world, and we care about getting better at making sense of this. So this graph just shows sort of raw usage. That huge bar at the top is United States, more views and downloads from anywhere. But what was really useful for me in this report was when the results were normalized to the number of downloads per institution. So taking into account how many institutions were in the country. And that totally changes the picture. Now we have the Philippines at the top, Uzbekistan, Bosnia. It really changes the picture of global usage of these books. So refining how we ask that question, where are our readers coming from, is a great opportunity. And we really want to know what types of readers are using the books. U of M Press is down on the right-hand side here, and these are the top institutions using the open access resources. There are several from the Philippines, one from Indonesia, a high school, a community college system. So these are exactly the types of readers that we are hoping to reach with open access. This also reveals one of the biggest gaps in this study, which is that we just don't know much about those unaffiliated readers. Frank pointed to this. There's a lot of them. We expect that there will be more. But other than knowing that they're there and we can't tell where they're coming from, we don't know much, and we'd like to know more. That's going to be really important. So to return to, are we asking the right questions to find out what difference OA makes? Some of the questions it turned out we couldn't answer in this study. Those might require further work. Some I think we can sort of check off. Either we learned what we needed to and we can move on, or it turned out they maybe weren't so relevant to publishers trying to tell about the impact of open access. And we've added some questions. We need to know more about unaffiliated users not at academic institutions. We need to know, when we're talking about usage around the world, sort of with respect to what? How many people are in that place? How many universities are in that place? And how does that change sort of the balance of usage? And we need to ask, as we've heard from others, are users able to find these books on the open web? And do we need to think about that, perhaps improve how that's happening. So what next? We'd like to use what we've learned from this study to establish good practices for reporting the usage of OA monographs that reveal the value of OA. What does that mean? It means that we, the publishers, are looking for reports that are comprehensive. That's a bigger conversation than just JSTOR. We want to pull in the data from all the different platforms. Consistent, so that we can compare across books, across presses. Customizable. We're looking to give these reports to others, our authors, our provosts, our grant agencies. So being able to select the right books is really important. Communicable. They're not diseases, but we want to be able to share them. And I'm going to steal one more adjective, which I'm taking from Russ McIntyre from JISC, who spoke yesterday about this. We want reports that are consumable, easy to read and parse and sort of discern meaning from. So graphs and visualizations, not just spreadsheets with thousands of lines. So that's really what we're hoping to see. And this report helps us, I think, refine what we want as we try to get there. Thank you.
Don't often get the chance to back cleanup, so there's a lot of pressure associated with that. Thank you to my fellow panelists and to all of you for attending. This has been a lot of fun for us at Cornell University Press, or maybe it's just been fun for me because the staff still have to do the work of publishing 130 books. But today I'll talk about a little bit about the open access background at Cornell University Press, our involvement with the NEH Humanities Open Book Program, our discoverability strategy for that, and talking about course use and how we're trying to instill course use for these titles, and how we feel and think about that. You see here, this is our website. It's really not, it's meant to be a marketing website, and we're going to have it be hopefully the umbrella for all of our open access activities, but right now it has the information, it has our first 20 titles, and you can get the EPUB here. You can also download a PDF, and you can then link to Project Muse and JSTOR and some of the other platforms. It's cornellopen.org. So really, this is about innovation, collaboration, and experimentation, and as a university press, we have to do that to ensure our long-term sustainability. The first, when I arrived at Cornell 2.5 years ago, we had a program with the German Studies Department called Signale. It's a series, and we published 17 books in this series. The books go open access after 5 years, after 4 years. And what we've seen for those first 5 titles is that the usage is about 4 times the usage when it was behind the firewall. So that's very encouraging, and we work closely with the library. Kaiser Walker is the managing editor of this series, so we, Kaiser's doing a lot of the German translation, so it's a great collaboration for us. And it really became the catalyst for our involvement in the NEH program. I had been at Project Muse and was also on the ground floor of talking about Muse Open, and I thought, it would be great. The staff, when I interviewed at Cornell, said we'd really like to do more ebooks. We can only do 5 to 10 a month because of our budget, and I think grant funding is a way for university presses to innovate. And so we just submitted for our 3rd grant. My goal is to have 150 titles for our 150th anniversary in 2019. And also, I think a lot about global dissemination and discovery. That's what we really need to do for this scholarship, is get it out to the widest possible audience. We also participate in Knowledge Unlatched, and we're looking for thousands of flowers to bloom here. That's really the main thing. We have a few days away from sending an announcement out about our frontlist open access program called Cornell Open, and that will be for frontlist books, and we have our first title coming out from that in spring of 18. So discoverability and how do we approach that? We really started working with the library, Oya Rieger, Kaiser Walker at Cornell, and the subject area specialists. So we were looking at Slavic studies, German studies, because we had experience there, and literary theory. Those are 3 really strong areas for us. My predecessor defined Slavic studies, helped shape the field over 30 years, and we felt like there were some really good classic out-of-print books there. Also, literary theory, Bernie Kendler, who actually lives in South Carolina, he helped shape the field of deconstructionism and those kinds of things. So we wanted to bring back a lot of those titles. And this slide, to me, is really about relationships. And I know Frank Smith, I know Wendy Queen and the staff of Project Muse, and there's a trust there. And I really wanted a multi-platform strategy for platforms that have been around for more than 20 years and have cultivated a user base. The folks that are coming to these platforms know how to use these platforms, and it's an engaged audience. So I really wanted to focus on those two places. Also, Amazon, we put the books on Kindle as well, and there's some interesting data I'll share with you on that. Hati and OAPN, and also the directory of open access books. That's key because they link to the Amazon titles, and that's produced some interesting results. Then, as part of the NEH, they really want to know what marketing we're doing and how are we enhancing discoverability and driving usage. So I was really perplexed by that at the beginning, and then sort of went back in my career and thought, hey, I know Celeste Feather and I know Charla, and maybe I could ask them to help. And Celeste and Charla basically put all of our titles in front of 5,000 libraries around the world. So. And not only that, they did an incredible questionnaire for us, so I'm going to continue to be sending titles and information, and that, that for me was a big breakthrough, because we were thinking, how can we really can't influence and drive usage and get to all the people without the help of the libraries. So, and here's our JSTOR results from October of 2016 through August. And we don't know. There's so much we don't know right now. Is that a lot of usage? I don't know, but it seems fairly substantial for 20 titles, and we're at the stage where, well, what are the usage levels that are, what are we aiming for? And you've got authorized users and unauthorized users, and Bread and Circuses seems to be, you'll see the title that is consistently the highest. And also, here's the results, some of the results of the study, the map of global domination that we like to show. And how can we get these books in 152 countries? Our print books don't travel that well. We can't do that. And when you're talking to an author, to be able to say, what's the most important thing to you in publishing this book? Hopefully, it's getting your scholarship to as many people as possible. And here's the Muse usage, which is also substantial. And I don't think it's additive. I think it's the same folks that are basically using both platforms, and that's been established over a long period of time. And these guys are optimizing our discoverability for us. They employ librarians to do that. So us I don't have folks that know anything. We know something about metadata. I don't have anybody I can turn to and say, hey, here's how do we make this discoverable? So I'm totally fine with having those two platforms be the ones doing that. Now, looking over at the Kindle, which is really surprising to us, and this is 12 months of activity in Vendor Central on Amazon, where I spend, as a press director, probably every day and night, more time than I should, watching that channel. But these are the books that have come into the top 20. And it's interesting, the Peasant Rebellion of 1905 in Russia is actually a really important thing now, it appears. I mean, there's a lot of these books. Russia is a topic that's top of mind. So these Slavic studies titles are getting downloaded from Kindle. And another thing I noticed was that in August and September, or July and August, there was over 4,000 downloads of the Kindle versions, and we even have some comments on the site about people happy about bringing these books back. So, from that standpoint, that fulfills our mission, and we're very pleased about that. So, the second grant, I decided we're going to try to do 57 titles, and now the grant monies, to me, we either just barely break even or we actually lose money, because it's a lot of work. I'm known as the breaker of workflows, so this stuff happens basically outside of a lot of the workflows that we've established for print. And I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to do a lot of the work on this, because this is about the future, and I'm happy to take that on while my staff kind of deals with the present. So I thought, I know some scholars up on campus, and I could put together a panel of folks to select titles, and this includes the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, the President of the Society for Humanities, two really outstanding scholars in literary theory. I went to the President and the Provost at Cornell and told them about this, and they really liked the idea of having books that are published by the press being used in Cornell courses. And these 57 titles will be published in the first quarter of 2018. We're going to go to the Modern Language Association and actually at our booth have information on, I want these books to be adopted for courses. I really do. We have a POD paperback for folks that, and I'll be reaching out again to Celeste and her team to get the word out. But this is kind of the goal for all of our titles. This scholarship, we have 6,000 backlist titles, and when we moved our warehouses, we had them all in this wooden cave. And I was thinking, like, this scholarship is useful. It needs to be brought back out. It needs to be, for the public good, we need to find a way to get it out. And here are just some of the positive remarks, about 47 instances of feedback that we got from Celeste and Charlotte's survey, which, there was lots of instructional things about MARC records in there, too, in terms of how can we make this more useful for librarians to then spread the word. And so the lessons learned for us is, I think there are some sort of usage standards or how people are reporting the usage would be good. I'm just always consistently left, and Eric and Frank touched on this, with JSTOR and Project Muse being just great partners. They're supporting this innovation, and it's great. The JSTOR study, Reimagining the Monograph, to take some of these titles and really mine them. Consortium-based marketing to get it to as many institutions as possible it really fits with the mission of what we're trying to do. Demonstrate the long tail. Kindle downloads, to me, it still sort of amazes me. And for our press, when I got there, we're sort of located halfway down the hill at Cornell, and we're sort of out of sight, out of mind. And this is a way to go back and engage with departments and engage with faculty and engage with our libraries to really put the press back top of mind and to do something that's I think good for scholarship and for the world. So thank you very much.
Thanks to all our panelists, particularly Becky, because she is the only one who actually came in under time. So yay, Becky. There is a break coming up, so we can have take a few questions if you have them, and some of you may have to scoot. But if you have a question, please go to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Windsor, and I'm with the business analyst for Project Muse. I agree wholeheartedly that we need to develop a standard for calculating the usage of this open content, especially when you consider the number of platforms that are beginning to share. I mean, you just list many, including what Project Muse is going to be doing next year. So I guess my question is kind of three parts. What is your recommendation for beginning the process to develop the standard? Who do you think should lead that effort? And who do you think should be involved in that conversation? This was for Frank, by the way.
Let's see. I'll pick which parts to answer.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, no, it's on. All right, I'll pick which parts to answer. We have started the conversation, first of all.
Okay.
And it's there's people in this room who are part of it, and we want you to be part of it. Okay. There are several ideas that we're floating around right now. Ideally, there would be a third party that would host usage statistics, and to which we would all contribute. We shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. There should be someone else doing it who we all trust. Where it could go and where it could then be used by others for whatever their purposes. So I think that's as much as I need to say about it at the moment. Yes, there's a lot of work to be done on it. We totally agree that something needs to be done. But,
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Another question?
Hi, Nathan McBrien from Northwestern University Press, and this question is for Eric. Eric, could you talk a little bit about the funding model for Luminos?
If you have about a day, yeah.
Yeah, that was my fear.
That's one of the reasons why I kind of glossed over it. I mean, it's a hybrid funding model, which we've talked about on a number of occasions, but it involves a contribution from either the author or the author's institution, a contribution from a library membership fund, and if there are librarians out here who want to contribute to that fund, I'd be happy to talk to you about doing that. And then it also involves revenue from POD sales, and then also a small subsidy from the press. So there are a number of different funding sources for a Luminos title. It's not just one. It's, I think Charles has deemed it the Magpie model, or one of them.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. When authors are up for tenure and promotion, particularly in some of the fields where maybe open access is lesser known, are you getting any pushback from authors or from tenure and promotion committees that you hear of, or is that not even an issue?
I guess I'll take that. I wouldn't say it's a non-issue. I will say that a number of the faculty whom we've published through the Luminoso program have been fairly established scholars who haven't had to worry about that. But we have had a couple of assistant professors who have published through the program who were just motivated by open access to do it. So it's not a non-issue, but it hasn't been insurmountable either. Do you have a comment on that? Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Just, I think there's a lot of education that's needed around the campuses in different faculty that to just explain what open access is and how and what we're doing. So.
And we can take one more question and then
Thank
we'll
you.
break.
Teresa Imfeld from Warren Wilson College in North Carolina. I assume academic presses also need to make a profit. So I'm just wondering if you might speak briefly to what's the financial incentive for doing what you're doing with open access. It's great, but because your press is, I'm a little confused by that.
So I have this new realization that all I need to do is get to zero and however I do that, it's fine. Like that's sustainable for me I don't think about, so truth be told though, we've gotten 400,000 to do open access and it's not cheap to do, but in terms of grant funding, we're at about 300,000 and then through Knowledge Unlatched, there's another 100,000, but that, basically we are increasingly, 70% of what we do is mission driven and we can't get out of that and we'll not get out of that because we're a certification and credentialing arm. And so as long as I can get to zero, my stakeholders are happy.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, I think there are ways to make open access sustainable, and I think, we're, again, I mentioned earlier, it's a work in progress for us. I think it's a work in progress for everybody, but I think there are ways to make open access sustainable, and we need to continue to work on it because most of our stakeholders in this scholarly communications enterprise are insisting on it, are increasingly insisting on it. So I think as service-driven organizations and mission-driven organizations, we really have to think about how we make it work. And work on, making it work.
Sure. I was just going to say, I think lots of these kinds of programs and initiatives are coming up right now. They all have slightly different business models, but I think the focus where people see the most promise is funds coming from lots of different places to sort of offset the costs. So not trying to replicate what I think has often happened in the sciences, which is like one article, one price. But rather, how can we find funds from a number of institutions or from a number of agencies or a number of initiatives to kind of collectively bear the cost of producing open access works that benefit everybody. So totally new ways of thinking about the business that we're still very much figuring out, but there's like lots of them springing up all the time that we're experimenting with.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and one more round of applause for our speakers.